What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a DADCAW. It is 9:47 in the evening of Friday, January 24th, 2020. We are squeezing this one in towards the end of the week. Almost forgot to do this one. Just been running around crazy trying to finish Toddborn in time. We have about 6 days, well, 5 after a couple hours. And I hope to use that time very wisely to bring you guys a very silly and exciting project that will probably see some minor updates throughout February before I forget about it for another year. So, at some point I will record some sort of channel map towards the end of this month where I discuss my plan for February, and I sort of recap the events of January and how we got on. And this is going to be something that's going to be a regular thing. It's another sort of public-facing bit of content where I actively reflect on what I've been doing that month and how things have gone and what I want to improve upon and what I think I could have done better and also what I think I did well. And of course, plan for the future. And I'm a guy who really likes to plan, really likes to talk a big game. And only recently am I really backing that up, but hopefully I can do that more frequently in 2020. That's my goal anyway. So just figured I would throw that out there as an announcement. I do actually have a topic for today, though. I have a topic that I wanted to discuss for some time. I'll probably mention it in one of the upcoming podcasts that I have with Mesk as well. But the topic is trivia versus wisdom. And I've actually discussed this a few times on stream during some mod streams, I think maybe a week or two ago. And the reason why I have been thinking about this more recently, because obviously it's been a bit of a time gap since I've actually talked about it on stream, is I recently had a really bad run-in with PyMPQ. Now, for those of you who are a little bit less technically conscious of Brood War modding, you may not fully gather what I'm talking about here, but basically PyMPQ is part of the Python modding suite, stands for Python MPQ editor. It's created by Poi Quirt, and that gentleman clearly never bothered to actually try to make a total conversion, which I guess, it's hard to say that most people have ever tried to do that, or even a significant conversion. But essentially, there is a default setting, actually not very hidden, but you wouldn't immediately think to even look for it in the code of the program, and thankfully it is open source, so I was able to investigate this when it happened, but there's a default setting that limits you to 1,024 files in every MPQ archive that you create with PyMPQ. And this is psychotic. This is just insane behavior. The idea that you would limit to the file structure this way. So there is no actual limit to the file format. If you open up StarDat, the basic StarCraft data file that handles all the vanilla data that comes with the game, you open that up with any MPQ editor, it will tell you that there's over 3,000 files, or almost 3,000 files, somewhere in the ballpark of 3,000 files, in that archive. So there's obviously no intrinsic limit to have stop the file count from rising after 1,024. It's not like it's a limitation of the game. It's not like it's a limitation of the file format itself. And so there's no reason to actually limit it. Apparently the reason to limit it before was because finding more space in an archive or expanding an archive in terms of its maximum file space was slower on older processors. But the Python modding suite was worked on and maintained in 2018, 2019. And it was created in its inception, and its original code was made probably well after 2009, I would think. Either way, it's like to the point where there's no actual reason, no legitimate technical reason or a hardware-based reason to limit the file format in this way. So this really set me off, and I've just been becoming more and more. It's been harder for me to ignore shitty software, just poorly designed software. Not in the sense where, like, okay, it's somebody's first time trying to write something and they're willing to update it after the fact. But like when you're making a public facing utility that's designed to work for anybody to use it, assuming they have the requisite technical knowledge. And of course I do know how to add a file to an MPQ, so that's not in question here. Now, the idea that I would have to root around in the source code for the tool just to identify the issue because it fails silently with no error is just insane. And obviously the Python modding suite has just an insane number of issues to the point where iQuare and I are basically resigned to making our own tool set, and most of the work will probably be done by him, but I'm going to try to pitch him when I can. The bottom line is there's no going back from that. There's no salvaging a program like that. There's no salvaging a tool set that's designed with that kind of mentality where we're just going to inherit lazily values that and limitations that have no actual bearing and no justification even. There's nothing the matter with having an MPQ archive that is greater than 1024 files in capacity. And so what I actually had to do to solve this was I had to download the LaTeX MPQ editor and make a copy of my MPQ and open it in this editor and then expand it using one of their file options. Now, here's the problem, is that that operation of expanding the file size worked like a charm in theory, but it also wiped all Firegraph data. And Firegraph was not able to read the data, even though the data was technically in the MPQ archive. I think probably because the list file that LaTeX use doesn't have Firegraph in it or something. So for whatever the reason is, I basically had to then remake my exe or remake my MPQ archive with LaTeX and then use Firegraph to load that MPQ archive into it. And then I could open it with PyMPQ and add it like normal. But just the fact that I had to do that is just an absurd level of trivia that is necessary to learn. It's trivial. These things are not like... If you had an actual professional grade technical tool set at your disposal for making what we call mods, now obviously the is a bit of an extreme counterexample here, but consider for a second you have anything that is even remotely approaching professional grade in terms of the level of competence that the programs were designed with, and the tool set that you're working with is receiving updates that are actually meaningful and fix problems rather than just add bloat or whatever like you see in Photoshop and all these other tool sets. So consider that you have an actual ideal scenario. You would not need to learn trivia like this. You would not need to find workarounds and use other people's programs and then find out that those programs have conflicts with other programs and then find another workaround that uses all programs just so that you can add a file to an archive. Like, especially considering the mundane nature of the task, you should not have to learn all this trivia. And you certainly would not have to in a world where you actually had anywhere close to professional grade tools, or just at least tools that had some level of documentation. I should also note that you can't even raise this limit in PyMPQ for new archives, let alone existing ones, yet LaTeX apparently is able to do this just fine. And so the idea that it's that level of silly, like there's an option in PyMPQ to raise the limit from the default value, but it doesn't work. So XD. And like this is so much shit in PyMS, especially the Python modding suite. It's like there's options to deactivate or reactivate or change some default setting somewhere, and you tick it, and it doesn't work. Like there was something related to PyAI that was constantly sending warnings, and I wanted to go and turn those off. And apparently there was tick boxes to do so, and then I did it, and it didn't work. And I had to get Veek to just force them off in his commit of the Python AI editor. So just like little shit like this, where in theory, the fix is actually rather mundane, right? It's probably some very simple fix on the code base level, but I'm not a Python coder. I shouldn't have to learn Python just so that I can fix somebody else's fuck up. And I certainly shouldn't have to learn a bunch of trivia unless I learn Python to fix their fuck up so that I can work around their fuck up. And that's where we get to trivia versus wisdom. There is not really much wisdom that goes into learning trivia. Nothing that directly contributes towards you expressing your skill as a developer with your end product. That the whole process that I just described to fix this, work around this issue with the file formats, there is nothing about my project, my total conversion or partial conversion or whatever you want to call Todborn. It's not a total conversion, but it's a significant conversion. Todborn will not ever demonstrate that particular skill. That's why we call it trivia, because there's nothing about that impacts the end user's experience and how they see things. Now, there's admittedly a lot of stuff that will not immediately be shown, but there's a certain level of craftsmanship that experts in the field will be able to observe, regardless of whether or not they are experts in development. They may be experts from a perspective of a very learned critic. And those people those analysts, right, through their analysis, will be able to expose whether or not you knew your stuff when it comes to craftsmanship, when it comes to the deeper levels of things. Just like we don't expect every player to learn and know every single in and out and be able to reflect on what they've played and be able to say whether or not there was some level of craftsmanship put into something. That's why you would generally, at least in an ideal world, we would rely on analysts and, people who are specialists in this nature where maybe they don't know the actual technical stuff, but they know how to see when somebody knows the technical stuff. They know how to read what the level of craftsmanship a product actually exhibits. There's nothing about downloading LaTeX MPQ editor and using that in conjunction with Firegraph to work around an issue with PyMPQ, just so I can open the exe with PyMPQ and add my fucking files. Nothing about playing my mod will ever demonstrate that particular skill set. So there's nothing. Like, you would have to actually get to the point where you're watching this video as part of like targeted research for a write-up on the mod in order to be able to understand that. And that's not because of the end result. It's because you found it through research and third-party media. It has nothing to do with the end product. So just in order to get my shit together and actually add a file, I have to learn all this trivia, and I don't become a wiser person. I certainly don't become a wiser developer. I just now know one more workaround. So this is where we get this distinction, because if I had to learn a different way to structure my file system and be more organized, which is one thing that I definitely wish I had done before I had gone into working on this project this year, that would at least lead me to, sharpen a skill that I can then use in many other projects down the line. I can't use this trivial thing in anything other than these very extremely rare circumstances where I have over 1,000 files in an MPQ archive. The most you could argue in favor of this sort of thing is if it actually pushed me to learn Python so I could fix this on a root level without having to go in and use another program as a workaround. But I would sooner learn C++ so that I could make my own tool. And that's not really there's a certain point where you reach an area where that usefulness or the realistic nature of that such a fashion, such a workaround in this sense bottoms out. And there's no way I'm going to learn every single programming language required, or just make my own programming language, why don't I, so that I can write my own OS and my own game engine from scratch, Jonathan Blow style, like a fucking lunatic. The odds are I'm not going to do that, right? And I also agree with the premise put forth by everybody who backs Unity and all these other engines, that you shouldn't have to do that just so that you can make a game, or in my case a fucking mod. There's not really any reason, no good argument that I can muster in an attempt to steelman the opposition in this case. Not that I'm really accusing anybody of arguing in favor of the opposition, just that every time I construct some sort of argument where, especially the stuff that really pisses me off, like really, really poor programming on the behalf of people who are releasing their shit that other people like me are meant to use to make stuff that they will then enjoy playing, as well as other people in the community. This is going to improve everybody. If I can just work on my stuff and I don't have to, feel like I have to rant about this in a DADCAW or something. At some point, you have to realize that the buck stops with the programmer, and they never get held to any degree of accountability, nor necessarily should they, I guess, but I think that in a world where you're releasing your tool publicly and you're providing documentation on it and you're asking for people to sign into a fucking Microsoft service like GitHub so that they can report issues, maybe you should actually solve some of those issues. Just saying. Now, I know real life catches up to us all, but maybe then you just work on it until it's done. I don't know. I don't know, man. I suppose if that guy, if that Poicourt developer gentleman decided to spend 15 minutes a day on his projects, he might actually have some functioning tools. That may actually have been something that would have been useful to share with him. Maybe he should listen to or read the War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. But yeah, I don't know, man. That was just one of those things that really pissed me off today. So glad to get that off my chest. Glad to deliver it in a way that I feel like is actually speaking to a broader truth that everybody will experience as a developer, regardless of your field, regardless of the unique technical knowledge that I focused in on for this particular example. I think that most people who ever try to make anything will have to learn the ins and outs and the trivias and the quirks and the little things that really don't improve your ability to behave in the world or to succeed as a human being, let alone a fucking software engineer or developer or whatever. It's just shit that you have to learn because usually it's because of incompetence. It's just that's the way things are. And unless you learn way more than what your job description or your passion would entail in a sane world, you're not going to be able to fix this at the root cause, because fixing it would require you to basically rewrite the program that you're dealing with in order to get rid of the trivia and replace it with wisdom, right? And that's the thing, is like, it's not even necessarily replacing trivia with wisdom. It's that you can't focus entirely on sharpening your skills and demonstrating your wisdom through your work unless you are in a world where you've already nullified all the trivia. And you can only nullify trivia by getting through all of the stupid shit or rewriting all of the tools yourself in a way that, or by having somebody you trust rewrite them in a way that they will be designed in some ways, maybe curtailed specifically to your definitions of what would be useful software. But generally speaking, you can get non-specialist software to get the job done if it's just developed competently. And if the developer is active in the space, maybe they can also add some customization options that would improve your ability to do your job with less overhead without it classifying as trivia, of course. So just some more food for thought, I guess. But definitely one of those things that the more I think about how incompetently software is designed, not just games, obviously, but just the toolkits that these developers are using on a daily basis to make this garbage that we all despise, you have to wonder where the buck really does stop. And I think it stops with whoever made those fucking engines. Who knows? Maybe it stops with the hardware guys. I don't think so, though. I think hardware has been the reason why we've had any market improvements at any point in most of this stuff. So who knows what will really happen, I guess, at the end of the day. But I don't expect much of this to change. The best we can hope for is iQuare becomes a fully fledged software engineer and just builds me an engine. So until that happens, I'll be sticking with Brood War and sticking with all its stupid quirks and trivias. But I guess one productive lesson you can take from this particular DADCAW is the more you just rote memorization understand all the trivias so that they become automatic behaviors that you just do without needing too much thought, without needing to dedicate too much creative thought or too much time in the execution of these trivias, these quirks, these stupid workarounds that you really shouldn't have to do. And the more you can obviously not be as emotionally upset about it as I was in the moment of really thinking about all this stuff, the more you can detach yourself from it and just sort of accept it, the better you'll be able to focus on the real important shit that is going to demonstrate how competent you are as a developer and how wise you are, how refined your skills are. And so I would liken it to something like, the difference between a developer that knows how to paint terrain in SCM drafts with on a tile by tile basis, which some of which is actually trivia, and a developer who knows how to design a functional level without necessarily it looking great. Obviously, if you design a functional level, that demonstrates more about your knowledge of level design, especially as it pertains to an RTS, than if you just make a level that looks interesting or thought-provoking or even objectively complete thematically. Obviously, you're demonstrating a different skill set then. But in order to accomplish it, the trivia of how you placed tile by tile every single thing in the map, that doesn't actually get communicated to the player or to the viewer. Whereas the actual skills of producing a well-crafted RTS level, those skills are communicated by virtue of the end product. Whereas most players have no idea how you place terrain in SCM Draft. No players have any idea how you construct these environments and make these doodads in Photoshop and add them to the tile set with PyTile and add them to the EXE with PyMPQ and all this other, trivia. Most people don't know that. What you want to focus on is what you can communicate directly to the player through the quality of your work. And that is my thought for you today. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully it was somewhat cogent. And I think we really brought it back at the end there. So enjoy. Bye.